Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Celia Milano, who's written 3 books on her family research and her trips through Italy. So welcome, Celia. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
When I was going through the notes and some of the things that you wrote, you started your research before many of us who you rely on the internet, correct?
Correct.
And I noticed that
Yes.
you were writing letters and all that kind of stuff. So what got you the bug to actually start the research in the first place?
Years ago, growing up, I always asked my parents where we were from. And because all our neighbors, I would be going to the temple with my girlfriend, going to this church, that church, and we all learned about each other. Okay. And when I asked my parents, they said, "Oh, we were born in America and we're American." And I said, "But Grandma and Grandpa talk a little bit funny. And they says, "Oh, well, they're old." So that was the excuse. But really, it wasn't until 1995, my mother sent me some papers, and she didn't realize within that pile of papers were the 2 birth certificates for my dad's parents. So I was jumping for joy when I saw them, and I said, "Oh my gosh!" So what I did was, I called a couple of folks. I got in touch with in Red Bank. There's a language school there, and I called them and I asked them. I said, "Is it possible to have a letter written in Italian?" And they says, "Yes, of course, no problem." So I researched and I found the Italian white pages, a version of it, a much earlier version that actually had everybody's home phone numbers in it and their addresses. So I took all the surnames that I found on the birth certificates, and I went to the language school, and they helped me form an introduction letter about who I was, who my grandparents were, and that they were born there in the town, and sent the letters out. I don't know, I guess it must have sent about 150 or 200 letters out to the town. And I received a letter from one gentleman, Lorenzo Milano, that happens to be my father's name, his given name, Lorenzo Milano. And it turned out I had to bring the letter back to the Red Bank school, to the language school, because there was no way in heck I'd be able to read it. So I brought it back, and they said, "Oh my, this gentleman writing to you is your grandfather's nephew." I said, "Oh my gosh." So that's how the correspondence began. So I would constantly be at the language school in Red Bank, and they would, we did the letter both in Italian and then on the back in English. So then this way I have a copy of it, and I would be able to know what I was telling them and asking them. And that went on for about 2 years. And I said to my oldest sister, I said, "I really would like to meet these people." And she was all like, my sister was 8 years older than I, and she'd never been out of the country, so she had to get a passport, and she was like a nervous Nelly. And but we went, and we were able to meet. As a matter of fact, when we arrived in Rome, Lorenzo's sister, who I did not know about, lived in Rome, and they called the hotel, because obviously Lorenzo told Maria where we were, and we got to meet them. Got to meet Maria, her husband, her daughter, and her son-in-law, who, thank goodness, he spoke several languages, and he taught at the university in Rome. So Alfonso then became our interpreter for the couple of days, that we were there. But it was nice, and that's what started it. I would have started much younger, but my parents, they were afraid because they were discriminated against growing
Yeah.
up.
I grew up in Queens, New York, in College Point, which wasn't, there were Italians, but it wasn't a real Italian enclave. But um, my grandparents lived in Corona, or at least my mom's parents lived in Corona, which was just, it was all Italian. So when you went there, it was like, it didn't matter. Everybody on the block had an Italian accent for the most part, all the older people. But that was interesting. You know, I don't recall, either one of my parents ever, feeling that way. But like I said, it's probably because they grew up in an area that was probably at the time 95% Italian. Before we talked and I was reviewing things, I thought that was very interesting that they said you were American and
Yeah.
that your grandparents were just old.
Yeah. That was the excuse. And, I was very persistent. And after a while, my mother just ignored me. But I found out later on, okay, that my mother and her sister, um, due to their parents splitting up, they were sent to a convent school. So during the week, they were at school. And then on the weekend, Grandpa Cotoni would bring them home.
Mm.
But what happened was at the school, and my cousin Patty confirmed this for me. She said to me, when the two sisters were speaking, because when they went to school, they all they knew was their Sicilian dialect. They didn't know English. They weren't exposed to the English language. So when they went to the convent school, whenever the two sisters tried to speak to each other, the nuns, I hate to say this, but the nuns hit them,
Mm. Yeah.
and they said English only. So I think that's what my mother was afraid of, that we would possibly have to go through what she went through and her sister went through. So that's why they didn't want us, to learn the dialect. And I wish I did, because as I got older, I tried to take, I can't tell you how many Italian lessons,
I know.
but
Me too.
but my head just can't absorb it. I mean, when you're young, you're like a sponge and you absorb everything, but not when you get older.
Yeah, I try and try and try, and I pick up a little bit here and there. Through the research, there's certain, when you're looking at the old records, there's certain keywords that you can pick up
Yes,
on, and you start to understand and things like that, or occupations and things. But I'm
yes.
I'm right there with you. My parents the same way. They spoke Italian to their parents, of course, and my dad's three of his older siblings were born in Italy, and my mom had two that were born in Italy. So
Oh,
um, you know, the they spoke all the time, and they would speak in Italian when they didn't want us to understand something instead of
yes.
teaching us.
Well, that was my grandparents, but it was like, we didn't know,
I
you know.
remember my mother telling me the story before I was born. When I guess my dad's father used to. I didn't know him. He passed away just right after I was born, but he would dress up as Santa Claus, and I remember my mother telling me that my brother, who's 5 years older than me, asked, "How come Santa Claus talks like Grandpa?" 'Cause he had this very heavy Italian accent.
Oh, that's too funny. It's too funny. Now, Bob, was your first language English, or do you know some Italian from growing up?
I mean, I know little, bits and pieces of Italian things, "Aspetta," because they used to tell you that
Ye-
all the time, and,
Yes, yes.
a few things like that. Um, and, I used to play cards with my grandmother, my mom's mother. So,
Oh,
there are a few things here and there, but certainly not enough to be able to
mhm.
claim to have any kind of real speaking ability. And, I can read it a little bit, again, because of going through the records and things. So you do kind of pick up stuff. But I wish they had taught us. And, I've
Yes.
talked to a couple of people, and one thing that, when we were growing up, and even now, the Polish had Polish schools for the kids, and the Jewish had Hebrew schools for the kids, and the Italians didn't do anything. They didn't do that. They
Correct.
didn't teach us
Correct.
anything. You know, they taught us how to cook, I guess, but
Yeah. Yes, they did. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I remember helping my grandma. Oh my gosh, make these Sicilian pizza. And we would knead the dough and all, and she would put it back in the closet, with the mopine over it, with
yeah, yeah.
dishcloth over it. And I would try to be peeking in the closet, and she says, "No, no, no." She says, "You have to wait. We have to wait." So finally, when the dough was ready, um, we put it in that big black square pan that she had. But the it was interesting because her Sicilian pie was just the dough, and my job when I was small was to put my thumbprints in the dough, and and we would then put pieces of tomato, drizzle a little oil on it, and then some oregano, and then put it in the oven, and that was the pie that we knew.
Mhm.
After my grandparents passed away, the first time my dad took us to the pizzeria, we got the Sicilian pie, and it was like we looked at it and we said, "What the heck is this?" Because it had all the cheese on it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it turned out that when my grandparents and my grandmother was growing up, they could not afford the cheese. So all my life, the Sicilian pie was just, the dough and the drizzle of oil and the little pieces of tomato. The first time, I'll never forget that. I close my eyes and I can see at the pizzeria what the pizza was. And we're all looking at the table. It's like, what the heck is this?
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. That's funny. Well, I'll tell you my Sicilian pie story. Both my aunt and uncle worked at the local bakery in Corona, um, Leonard's, and they had this great Sicilian pie. It was, I never forget. I mean, I could taste it now. That's how good it was. It's thick and it was so good. The owner's, I guess she's his granddaughter. She posted something about it, and somebody said something about the recipe and all of that. And I said, "Boy, I'd love to have the recipe," because I knew my uncle used to make it back in the late 50s, early 60s, late 50s probably. And so she said, "Well, unfortunately, it died with it was either her father or uncle." And then
That's
her
right.
cousin said, "I have it, but I swore I would not give it to anyone, only the family."
Oh.
So I mentioned my mother's last name, Nicoletti, and I said, my uncle Frank used to bake the pizza. He used to make the dough of the pizza. He used to be a baker. And he came back and he said, "Oh, you're that Nicoletti. Send me a message." So I sent him a message and he said, "Your family, I'll give you the recipe."
Oh,
So
wow.
he gave me the recipe. And again, because he said he's probably 10 or 12 years older than me. He said, "I remember your uncle making, I remember being there when he was making it. I was like 20 or whatever. And I remember him and I remember your aunt and all of that." So I was able to get the recipe and he said it's not exactly the same because of course you don't have the same equipment and all of that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
be it'll be pretty close. But what I do with the dough, the proofer, I kind of fake it. I put it in there and then I put a pan of boiling hot water in there for the steam. And
Oh.
I let it proof with the steam.
Oh.
And it gives it put of course you put the towel over it and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But that, I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but I kind of keep it warm that way, especially if you have the air conditioner going
Yeah.
in the summer or something like that. And that's the other thing that amazed me when my aunts and stuff would cook. They would be in this hot kitchen, no air conditioning for hours and hours and
Yes.
hours.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
food that came out of that was,
Yeah. Phenomenal.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't replace it. So now the first trip you made to Italy, was that the one with your sister, or had you gone before that by
No, no,
yourself?
I went with my sister. I went with my sister. Um, I asked my husband, I said, "You gonna come with us?" He says, "No." He says, "It's all you're gonna be doing is like talking, 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 family, blah 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 blah." I said, "Okay, fine." So it was just my sister and I, and no, we had a wonderful time. You know, we were with the relatives in Rome for a day or two. That was very nice, and then we flew to Palermo. We rented the car, and what I did at first was we went to Messina, to Labrizzi, to the mountain town, because I had my grandfather's papers, so I wrote to the whatever Catoni family I could find in Labrizzi. So we went to Labrizzi. That's how I know about that mountain road going up there. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And then we met one of the Catoni families there. We're still in touch. We're still in touch. We believe, we're still trying to make the connection about cousins and all. But they did bring me to the cemetery, and I went to some of the gravestones there. And then we were there for a while. We went to the Aeolian Islands, we went to Lipari. We went all around. And then it was time to go to Castellammare. And I drove. My sister, she had the map. But it was an interesting drive because at one point the road stopped because they didn't chop through the mountain. So you had to stop, go down to the sea road, and then go back up. I don't know if it's still the same. I
Yeah,
haven't.
they may have. Maybe
Yeah.
they've modernized it since then. Yeah, it's possible. I drove. It was probably around the same time. It's 90. When were we in Italy the first time? 96, I think. And I was a
You
lot
went
younger, so
96.
I drove this. When we went last year, I wasn't driving anymore. I said, I'll sit in the back.
Oh, okay.
But I remember driving on uh, the road in the Amalfi, which was like one lane going up the mountain, and you have to try to find it. And these trucks are coming past you and everything
Wow.
like that, and
Yeah.
it got scary. Uh, so
Yeah.
now, so what did the family think when you got there? What did they have to say when you showed up?
Well,
Did
it
they
was
know you were
very.
coming? I guess they did.
Yes, yes. Lorenzo knew because the letters back and forth. And I had said to him, my sister and I are going to come, and please. We didn't. I could not find a hotel there. So when I wrote to him, I said, please. I said, just make the arrangements, and then when we get there, we'll make the payment. So we met in a cafe before you get to Castellammare, because boy, oh boy, even getting in that town was like, there are a lot of one-way streets, which I found out later on driving around. A couple of times I went the wrong way on the street, on the streets. Thankfully, nobody was on the road at that time. But so we met Lorenzo there. Now, when he came through the door of the cafe, I said, oh my God. I said to my sister Lori, I said, look. I said, it looks like Daddy. Same shape, the same body shape. It was like, oh my God. It was like my dad was coming through. And the two of them looked very, very, very much alike. So it just floored us. It really did. So we made the introduction. So now, we're talking, like we're miming and all.
Yeah.
We didn't have our friend Google at the time. Okay. So, well, it was interesting because when we got into town, we went to their townhouse. And it turns out that Lorenzo was giving my sister and I the townhouse for the time we would be there. And they were going out. They had a country home. So they were going there. And they also had, the olive groves out there. And they had grapes, too, the vineyard. So for the time my sister and I were there, we stayed at their home in town. And they were out in the vineyard.
Wow.
So that was very sweet of them. We didn't even know that they were going to be doing that. And we met their son, my second cousin, third cousin. I don't know. We have to do those numbers. Yeah. And Renzo spoke some English because he had worked overseas for a little bit. So we were able to communicate. Renzo now was our interpreter. And, they brought us all around town. Even out at the vineyard, they had a barbecue there, which my sister and I didn't know. I mean, I had to learn how to drive to go out to the vineyard. And so I was able to get myself there and to get us there. And it turns out that everybody that I wrote to those few years before were at the barbecue, right? The get together.
That's incredible.
Because I guess what happened was I wrote all the surnames is what I did. And then Renzo said to me, everybody who got the letter went to my father to find out, who the heck you were, And, when they said no, Rosario was my uncle. So it was, I got the stamp of approval because of who I was. So I got to meet all these folks. It was just unbelievable. And it was interesting because I sat next to Renzo and people were looking at me, they were looking at Renzo. They were looking at me, they were looking at Renzo because we pretty much look alike.
Mm.
And then when when his dad Lorenzo sat next to us, even my sister said, she says, "Oh my gosh, Celia," she says, "the three of you look alike." So I guess that's what a lot of folks were looking at when I saw all the heads turning. I said, I don't know what the heck is going on. But no, it was a wonderful, wonderful visit. It really was.
So now, do you know how many years they were there? I mean, how far back were you able to go there in time?
They were there forever.
Yeah.
They were there forever. Parts of the family were. The one, the great-grandfather, who I found out is a foundling. He was born in Castellammare. And I can't find out that much about this gentleman. I've done some research, and because I don't know if he was an orphanage, if he was adopted. I have, there's a gentleman in Sicily, Rosario. He does a lot of research for folks, especially here in the States. So I asked him, I said, how is it that I can find anything out? So I think, I haven't been there since 2019, obviously, because of everything that was going on in the world. But I want to go back to Castellammare. I want to go through the records there. There was a woman there, Serafina. I think she's since retired. But if you go to the records, I mean, it's the actual record, the registry, okay? And a lot of it has not been digitized. So the last time I was there, she climbed on the ladder. She went all the way to the top to get the book out. And that's when I found out that he was a foundling, because She had sent me a year before his birth certificate, but on there were no parents listed. So I brought the birth certificate with me, and I said to her, I said, no parente. So that's when she went and she got the book, and that's when we found out that he was a foundling. And back then, what they did with some of the foundlings is if there were, quote, business people in town, like a blacksmith, a shoemaker, if they needed an apprentice, if they needed somebody to work for them, that's how they were able to get, an employee. And plus, the person was able to learn a trade.
Mm, yeah.
And on one of his son's death certificates, it said that his father was a shoemaker. So I'm saying to myself, okay, so he learned from somebody when he was growing up to be a shoemaker.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Which
interesting.
I found interesting. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to find any kind of records, because I don't know back then if they tracked these children, or they
No, I
just
don't think they
just
did. Yeah. Especially if they were left,
at the wheel. He was left
yeah.
at the wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unless somebody left something like a ribbon or a medal or
Correct.
something,
Correct.
but they so you probably wouldn't know. Yeah.
And this was during the Garibaldi era,
Yeah.
when they had all the freedom fighters in Sicily. So who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows what happened? But he was left at the wheel.
Yeah,
And
that's an interesting thing, and we just saw it on TV the other day. I forget where it was. The fire department someplace here in the States where it's almost like the same thing. I was shocked. I said, "That's the wheel." Where you if you yeah, you could leave the baby. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
They
Um,
had it they had it at the church,
yeah, they would
um,
have it at the
at
church.
the
Yeah,
hospitals,
yeah,
and if the family was able to later on want the baby back or the child back, yes, they would leave a ribbon or a card or something in there that would identify, the parents could identify the child.
yeah,
But if you didn't leave anything there, that meant that the child would grow up in the orphanage or wherever.
yeah, yeah. Well,
You know,
I guess the fact that people would take them in, I mean, maybe wasn't a great life, but at least they taught them a trade and things.
yeah.
So that was your dad's family, right? Now, is your mom's family from the same area, or also from Sicily?
My mom's family is partly from Castellammare, and then her dad was from Labrizzi. And my sister and I, as I said, we went to that town, and we met some of the Catonis. I think sometimes that people are a little leery,
Hmm.
okay, when you contact folks, because in all my letters I say I just want to continue the family history, is what I want to continue. You know, I'm not looking to move in with you, or or anything like that. But it's just the history,
Yeah,
because
I found the people there. They're so willing to help,
yes,
especially when they find out. I found I started, I guess, 15, 16 years ago, and I found I did the same thing you did, only I basically did it electronically. I was on Facebook, looking for the names and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And I found a fourth cousin she's been just, tremendous help, uh, helping me, not only confirm, um, but to help me find others. And she couldn't wait for us to go. I mean, we were supposed to go in April of 2020, just as COVID hit, and we wound
Oh
up having to
gosh.
cancel it, and for like 2.5 years or something like that, and finally got to go last June. But I'm
Oh, you
dying to go
do.
back. I'm dying to go back.
Yeah, I want to go back this fall. I would like to go back only because it's interesting. I made friends in town, and then this one older gentleman who he found out who I was at one of the cafes, because what I did was I brought I brought all my family history, my genealogy sheets with me. And when I first walked around the town, people would see like tourist,
Of course.
okay, on a tourist on my head, okay, until this gentleman, a younger fella, Vito Alfano, he owns the gelateria, and he says, no, the cousins were here in town, grandparents. So no more do I have tourist on my forehead. But people would come to the cafe and they would look to see who was in my family tree and who knew this one, who knew that one.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But this older gentleman who was introduced to me by Vito Alfano, he says to me, many years ago, in 1997, and he knew the year, he said, I was having cafe with Lorenzo, my friend, and he said he had to leave because he had to go pick up and meet two cousins coming from the United States. So Enzo was having coffee with my cousin, and so he remembered that day.
Mm.
So ever since then, I met his wife Santina. We would go for dinner, but Santina's family has in Alcamo, they have a summer house there, but also all kinds of fruits and vegetables growing there, including the olives. So in October of 2019, my last time there, I was at the orchard and we picked the olives.
Mm.
And I said to Enzo, I recently texted him and I said, I want to come back in the fall because I want to, again, be involved with the olive harvest. I loved it. Oh my gosh, it was unbelievable. You get these rakes and you're just raking trees, and then some of the guys are standing on the ladders, and it's like, oh my gosh, it was just phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed it.
And
so I hope,
and you can't compare. Our bottles here say olive oil, but they're not olive oil. That's
yeah. Well,
not
it was
even
funny.
close.
It was funny because what he did was he made up a little Tupperware for me, okay? And I had to put it in my suitcase. He said, because he says, for Vito, because my husband he's the chef in the family. So he wanted him to have some of the olives. I said, oh my gosh. I said, I don't even know if I can bring that in. Well, now they know now.
Yeah, we did the same thing when we were in Capicota. They gave us, there were two young guys who just started like a commune or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to make, ancestral type of lentils and beans and things like that.
Yeah.
And so they started this farm and they gave us a bag of lentils. And I was like, I don't know if we're allowed to bring this back or not.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say anything. If they ask, we just say we don't have anything, which is what we did. So I guess we smuggled in a bag of lentils.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
there's a lot of that going on now. A lot of these, there's a lot of agriculture that they're, trying to go back to the old ways. And it's the same thing with the fruit and vegetables and everything. Everything is just so fresh and all of that. It's amazing. So I want to talk a little bit. I said at the beginning you wrote 3 books. So what are the 3 books about? Before we forget.
Well, yeah. The 3 books. Well, my first one was my Sicilian family adventures, and that pretty much is my story that I just told you about, mom and dad, not telling us anything, and then, you know, myself getting all the information, the birth certificates, and so I pretty much wrote. That was my trip with my sister in my Sicilian Family Adventures. That was that book. The and what happened one of the times I went to Sicily, I was supposed to meet my cousin Salvatore. Now, Salvatore is Lorenzo's son, but he lives in Pisa. He has a construction firm in Pisa. So the last time I was there no, I think it was in 2018 I met him there. Um, we were supposed to meet for dinner, but I mean, he had a lot of things going on. So we did meet for 1 hour. We had dinner, okay, and then we corresponded because he does have a little bit of English language, but we corresponded through the messenger.
Mhm.
So, and then on Facebook, and I mentioned this in my second book. He had said that they went to an Andrea Bocelli concert or whatever. I said, okay, fine. I said, years ago, my friend Francine and I, we were in New York City and we saw Andrea there. It was like fantastic. So a few days later, he reposts on Facebook and there's something there that I couldn't read. It was all like, I just couldn't read it. So I wrote to him and I said to him, what is this thing that you posted? I can't read it. He says to me, he says, it's your tickets. I said, tickets for what? He says, you will be coming to Tuscany and you will be seeing Andrea Bocelli at the Theater of Silence. The facility, well, really, it's just a mountainside that Andrea Bocelli owns, that they set up the chairs, the screens, and he just plays outside. It was like, oh my God, it was like fantastic. It was unbelievable. So my Tuscany in July book is about my trip to Pisa to stay with my cousin Salvatore and his girlfriend Monica. And they took me all around. I love Pisa. I was there just about every day. I love to walk.
Yeah, we walk a lot too,
you know,
yeah.
I say I walk the streets and people look at me like, what are you crazy? I enjoy walking the streets. You see so much when you walk,
Yeah.
even going down the little alleyways and everything. Yeah, I love doing that. I love walking the streets.
And not only that, you feel like you're part of everything when you're doing that.
Yes.
You're engaged.
Yeah, and when you go down those side streets, I mean, you see other little stores too.
Yeah.
And when we were in Pisa, we would walk down a couple of the side streets, and there was a gentleman there who would be weaving. I have a picture of him in my book weaving. I was just so fascinated by this man, and it was just you just find so many different things when you walk. Yeah, and I always carried my backpack with me, and I had my family trees in it, just in case people ask me. Oh my gosh.
So the interesting thing, especially in Naples, my grandmother's mother is Guacciolo, which is one of it's the name in Naples. I mean, they go back to 950. So,
Oh my gosh.
so as soon as somebody found out that I was Caracciolo, it was like, oh my, do you know? I said, yes, I know. That's why I'm here.
That's why I'm here.
And the name is everywhere. But yeah, that was kind of my ticket into everything. As soon as I dropped that name, it was like, you're famous. You're famous.
No tourist.
I mean, my in the Duomo in Naples, And I didn't notice till we got there. They actually have a statue of Saint Francis Graccholo, and
Oh,
he's not in my grandmother's direct line. He would probably be some sort of distant 16th cousin, 10 times removed, or whatever he was. Uh, but you know, it was there, and we actually got a tour. I mean, he was so nice. Don Augustino was probably in his 80s. He's was probably I don't know what the relationship was, but he was certainly a distant cousin, or maybe not even that distant to my grandmother. And he gave us a tour of the church and all of that
how
kind of stuff.
sweet.
And yeah, just I wasn't expecting that. They said, "Oh, this is Don Augustino Caracciolo, and he's going to tell you about the Duomo and San Gennaro and all of that kind of stuff."
Wow.
But that's a good idea. I have to do that next time. Is bring the paperwork with me. Because
Yeah,
we want to go to Puglia this time to where my mother's family is from.
and now on Facebook there are a couple of ladies who now well, she became an Italian citizen. She lives part-time in Labrizzi, part-time in another town. So, when I go there are a couple of different folks now that I'll be going to different places in Sicily to visit, to meet up with some of the folks because we're all doing our history.
Yeah, that's what I want to do because my dad has I guess Roberto is I think my second cousin, and he's in Puglia in Toronto because my grandmother's brother was an admiral in the Italian Navy. There's a big Navy base in Toronto.
Okay.
And so they said, you come, of course you come, we'll take you, we'll do this and we'll do that and the other thing. And they're only about an hour from Torito in Puglia, so we'll be able to go back and forth
Yeah, that's nice.
yeah. So I'm looking to forward to going there. And so now so that's the two books. What was the third book?
My third book.
I want to get them all in.
Well, my third book was Life's Curves. And I started writing this book, totally different reason. But in one of my writing groups that I belong to, one of the gals said to me, she says, well, we're in the middle here of this whole pandemic. She says, maybe you want to put a twist in there about it. So then I started thinking, because when I was supposed to go visit my cousin in Pisa, he had texted me there on the messenger, and he said to me, because I was supposed to go for Easter
Hmm.
in 2020. So he wrote to me. He says to me, "Did you book your ticket yet?" I says, "No, not yet." It was like September, October, and he says, "Do not." I said, "Okay, why not?" And he had said to me, he was in Pisa, and he says what was happening. A town or two north of him, there were folks who live in that town who commute back and forth to Asia, and the people in the town were getting very ill, and they
Really?
were shutting the town down. And that was September
Wow.
2019.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, okay, so I took that information because it wasn't known here yet. I mean, we didn't know until January,
Right.
February the
Yeah.
following year. So I took that information and I had that to be the beginning of a book, to have two friends, one who was doing a photo shoot in Rome, who was a very, leggy gal, who these two gals grew up together. And, you know, to start the story with that, with the gal
Mhm.
saying, oh, she says, she called and she told her friend, well, I'm back in the States. And she says, like, why? And they said, well, because there's some kind of virus or sickness going around, and the magazine who she worked for um, told them to all leave, and they left. And that's how that book started. So it is two gals looking back on their life and everything that they did.
Mhm.
So what happened here in the present triggered their past and things that they did together.
Oh, that's
And a lot of
interesting.
it is based on trips that I took with my younger sister, with one of my high school girlfriends. She's the redhead. We called her Irish because she had flaming red hair and freckles. Same as my little younger sister, yeah. So that's what that book is about.
Oh, that's great. That's interesting. And that's interesting about the whole thing back, September, October of,
Yes,
uh,
yes.
um, because, who knows with that whole thing. I mean, I don't think we'll ever know the whole story, but at least now it's doesn't seem to be as bad and,
Thank
I think,
God.
yeah.
When I was doing my research, okay, I found out that one of my great uncles, he died from cholera, and that was in Sicily, and another one from the Spanish flu. Because when I went to the record office at the cemetery in Castellammare, I was able to. They gave me all the registries, and I was there hours, hours, hours on end. And finally, I found one of the names I was looking for, and the gentleman brought me to his grave, which really is, a joint grave,
Mhm.
because what happens is, I don't know elsewhere in Europe, but I know in Sicily, even though you purchase a mausoleum drawer, or your family builds a mausoleum, or you're in the ground, if the ground taxes are not paid, they exhume you and they
Yeah.
put you in a mass grave. So I started on one of my trips. I go to the cemetery and I photograph all the gravestones, and then I put them up on Find a Grave. Because what happens is, if people are doing their research and they know their, ancestors came from this particular town, if they go, they won't find the grave. But if I snapped a photo a year or two before they were exhumed, it's up on Find a Grave. So, I do that for my fellow genealogists trying to find out family information. But I mean, I never knew that until I went. And I kept seeing these signs saying Avazio, Avazio. And I'm saying to myself, what is that? So I asked cousin Felice, and he told me that's what happened.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was, and I was just totally appalled, because, I have all the deeds to all the graves for the family. And, nobody's gotten exhumed as far as I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because here in the States, when you purchase the
Yeah.
grave, you
Yeah. You have
purchase the
it.
grave.
Yeah. You have it.
Yeah.
It's yours forever. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that in Europe. I mean, that's how it is, I know, in Sicily. I don't know about the rest of Europe.
No, I think it's pretty much the same, at least in the rest of Italy. I know when we went, my great grandfather, who is my cousin's grandfather, because he had two families 30 years apart, but
Okay.
he showed me the original mausoleum, and I said, is there family in there? And he said, no. He said, um, my great great grandfather sold it to another
Oh,
family.
oh,
So whoever was in there from my family then was moved to wherever.
wherever.
They put the bones, in an ossuary, whatever they did with it. Um, and so he said, no, he said, but even now, he said, now nobody owns it. Again, you could see it's got a gate, but it's all falling apart and everything. So there's basically nobody there, but that's probably what happened. They probably didn't upkeep the payments or whatever, and so it's just an empty mausoleum now. So I think it's pretty much the same everywhere in Italy. Well, Celia, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate taking the time. And so, where can people find the books if they want to purchase one or all three?
Well, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online. We have them
And,
here at the book.
and we'll
Yeah.
put all the links up there so people could
Okay,
look for
great.
them. So,
Great.
well, listen, thanks again. Have a great day.
Yes, and thank you so much, Bob. It's great talking to you.
Same here. My pleasure.